Alright, so you've already seen what this kind of load does, but now let's actually go ahead and understand what's going on and why it does what it does. Now, first of all, what you do when using jQuery, or what you will do very often, is first of all select an element that you want to work with. And to do that, you again use the dollar symbol, or as I told you, you could use jQuery instead. It's just a shorthand notation for that. And then in parentheses, you can pass in a string that basically just contains a CSS selector. So in this case, I'm using a CSS selector that matches all elements which have the class red box. So we use the dot as in CSS to refer to classes. If we wanted to select an element with an ID of red box, we could use the hash symbol. And this would then refer to the single element with the ID of red box. But when you look into the HTML code, you can see that I actually use classes here. So we have divs with classes of red box, green box, and blue box. So when using our jQuery selector, we also have to put a dot in front of the class name. And what you can also do, of course, is you could select all list items or all anchors by just using the standard CSS selector again. So you just specify the name of the element you want to match without any classes or IDs. And you can also combine this as you would do with CSS. So you can select all anchors or all link elements with a class of external, let's say. And that would match all the anchors in your HTML document which have a class of external. So you can try out different CSS selectors in here. For now, we're going to still refer to the red box. So you now know how to select elements in jQuery. Just basic selectors. We're going to talk about more advanced ways to actually traverse your document later on in this course. But for now, I want you to dive in and just create some fun animations and visual effects to really get to know jQuery a little bit. And all you need to know for now is you can use CSS selectors, which makes it really easy in jQuery to get the elements you want. And also for a selector like this one, because it selects all elements which have this class, if we had multiple elements on our page which have this class red box, then the selector would also select all of them, and then calling fadeOut would cause all of those elements to fade out. On the other hand, if you select by ID, you usually have just one element that you're working with, and jQuery just handles this no matter what you do. So whether you have a single element selected or multiple elements, you can just call the same functions on them as you like. In this case, we're calling the fadeOut function, which causes the element to fade out. And as the first parameter, we can pass in the duration in milliseconds. So in this case, I use 2 seconds, 2000 milliseconds, so that we can nicely follow the animation. But you can also leave this blank, which will then use the default duration, which is 400 milliseconds. So let's go ahead and actually use the default value. So let's save this and jump back to the browser. So now when I refresh the page, you can see that this animation is rather fast, which is why I used 2 seconds instead. Now what you can also do, there are 2 predefined values called slow. So when we use slow and then go back, it's still rather fast, but it's now 600 milliseconds instead of 400. And similarly, there's also a value predefined called fast, and that just refers to 200 milliseconds. So even faster than the normal animation. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back to 2 seconds so that we can follow the animation on the screen. Alright, so now we're at the point where I'm going to give you your first mini challenge. And I'm going to include mini challenges throughout the course where I'm just going to stop for a few seconds, give you a challenge beforehand, and then I'm going to pause for a few seconds. So there you have time to pause the video, go into your editor, and try to solve that mini challenge. So the first mini challenge I have for you is to also fade out the green box that you can see on the page. And the duration should also be 2 seconds. So pause the video right there, and then I'll see you in a minute when you finish this mini challenge. Alright, so what you can do is you can copy this line if you're lazy, then select the green box instead using the class selector again. And also we're going to keep 2000 milliseconds as the duration. So now let's go ahead and save this and then go back to our browser. Now I'm going to reload this again so you can see. And now we have both boxes disappearing over the course of 2 seconds. Alright, so now there's one other method which performs the opposite, so it fades in an element, and as you may already expect, that function is called fadeIn, and it also takes the duration as a parameter, so everything else is basically the same. Now what I want you to try next is to fade the red box back in, and I'm going to change this back, so both boxes will disappear first, and now I want you to fade in the red box again after it has been faded out. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to do that. You can pause the video now and then get back. Alright, so let's go ahead and write the selector manually this time. And I'm going to say .redbox.fadeIn, and we want 1 second this time. So I'm going to save this and then jump back into the browser. Alright, so you can see it fades out over 2 seconds along with the green box, and then it fades back in. Nice, so now I want you to learn one more such animation, which allows you to not only fade to complete invisibility or to complete visibility, but also to any opacity in between. And that function is called fadeTo. So let's say after fading our red box back in, we want it to fade back to, let's say, 50% opacity. So now the first parameter is still the duration of the animation, and then the second parameter defines which opacity you want to fade to. So depending on the current opacity of the element, it will either fade in or fade out. So if the current opacity is just 0.2, then it's going to fade in until it reaches opacity 0.5, so 50%. If the opacity currently is 80%, let's say, then it's going to fade out until it reaches 50% opacity. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. So it's going to first fade out over 2 seconds, then fade in again, and only fade out half. So now it has stopped at 50% opacity, which is exactly what we wanted. Alright, so it's now time for a little more challenging mini challenge. So you can get rid of the code we had so far, and then I want you to fade all the boxes. Let's go back. I want you to fade them from left to right to 20% opacity for the red box, then 50% opacity for the green box, and 80% opacity for the blue box. So each of them should have a different opacity in the end, and the opacity is going to increase from left to right. If you want, you can also give them different durations. I'm not going to restrict that in any way, so you can play around with the durations a little bit. And you're going to have to use the fadeTo function in this case, because you have to specify your target opacity and not just fade them out completely or fade them in completely. Alright, so I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. You can pause the video here, and then I'm going to show you the solution. Alright, so let's go ahead and do this. First of all, we want to have the red box, and then we're going to say fade to, let's say 3 seconds, 0.2. Then we want to have the, oh, and I need only one dot, of course. We want to have the green box next, then the blue box. Now for the green box, I'm going to take a little less time because it only needs to fade out to 0.5, and then I'm going to go for 1 second, fading out to 80%. Alright, so let's take a look at that in the browser. So the end result looks good already, but I want to reload the page so that we can see the animation. And you can see that we have different opacities for each of them. The red one fades out most, then the green one only fades out to 50%, and the blue one only to 80% opacity. Alright, perfect. So now you know how to fade in elements, how to fade them out, and how to also fade them to a specific opacity value you want to have. There's one more really convenient function, which is called fadeToggle. So let's say we want to have our blue box, and then we can say fadeToggle, which is going to toggle the fade, which means that if the element, in this case the blue box, is already shown, it's going to fade out. But if it's currently faded out already, so if it's invisible or not shown, then it's going to fade in. So that's really useful if you're not really sure if your element is currently visible or not. So you don't really have to decide, do I have to call fadeIn or fadeOut now? You can just use fadeToggle, and then jQuery is going to take care of it and do the rest for you. So we can actually go ahead and duplicate this. So we can toggle it twice. And now let's see what happens. All right, so let's actually reload this page again. So all of them fade out a bit. Then the blue box fades out rather quickly because I didn't set any duration, and then fades back in again. Now, if you've watched really closely, or if you have very good eyes, you may have noticed that jQuery actually also takes care of fading the element back into the opacity that it had before. So for our blue box here, before fading it out using the fadeToggle, it had an opacity of 80%. So jQuery, when we first call fadeToggle, goes ahead and fades out the element, but it also stores and memorizes basically the opacity of that element before fading it out. So that when we call fadeToggle again, it fades back in, but only to the opacity value that we had before. Now to make this a bit more obvious, let's just use the green box instead and then see what happens. So now everything fades out. Now the green box fades out and fades back in again, but only to 50% opacity. So you don't have to do that yourself either, because jQuery takes care of that for you. So the fadeToggle function is really useful if you want to fade elements in and out again, and you don't really have to take care of much yourself. Alright, perfect. So this kind of animation may be useful when you want to fade in elements when the user clicks a plus or a read more button or something like this. Another case where you may use this animation would be to show a model window which takes over the whole screen with some opacity and then asks the user to subscribe for an email list, for example. Also, you may use these fading animations in a form where you fade in the next kind of text input or text field that's going to be needed in the next step, something like this. So I hope you enjoyed these first animations and visual effects. I think it's really great how easily you can actually have your first results with jQuery, and I really hope you're enjoying this. And also I hope you're excited to see what other animations and then also what other functionality jQuery has to offer. So once again, when you have any kind of questions, let me know in the discussions, and otherwise I will see you in the next lecture.